In this video, I'm going to discuss a linear function. So now, in the previous video, I've done a brief introduction to functions. So now in this video, I'm going to discuss a linear function. So now, the basic standard for a linear function is f of x equals to mx plus c. So now, we said that f of x, it represents what? It represents y values. And m represent what? Represent our slope, or the other way for that, it is what? A gradient. So now, how do you find this slope? So now, suppose we are given 2 points, point 1 x1 y1, and also point 2 x2 y2. So now, in order to find the slope between those 2 points, we are going to say slope or gradient, it is equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus xy. So that's how we can find the slope. So now, what does c represent? So now, c represent what? The y-intercept of our function. So now, what does this y-intercept tells us? It indicates when the function will move up or down. So now, that's what our c tells us about. So now, this c is a y-intercept, which indicates when the function will move up or down. So now, in the previous video, did show how will our gradient affect our graph, or how our gradient will determine our function. So now, if our function, if our gradient is positive, then our function is an increasing function. So now, how do we demonstrate that? This is how we demonstrate that. If our gradient is what? It is positive. So now, we'll draw it in our axis, Cartesian plane. So now, if our function is increasing, suppose that's f. So now, this is how our function will increase. If or let's say, if our gradient is positive, then this is how our function would look like. This is when our gradient is positive. But then, what if our gradient is negative? So now, if our gradient is negative, then our function f, is a what? It's a decreasing function. If a gradient is what? It is negative. It is a decreasing function. So now, this is how our function would look like. Y equals to negative mx plus c. So yeah, that's how the gradient determines the shape of our graph. So now, the most important thing for our function is the domain and also the range. So now, what is a domain? Well, a domain is the set of all x values for our function. So now, for a linear function, the domain for a linear function will be what? Will be x. X will be the element of what? Because our linear function it is defined everywhere in our axis. That means our domain will be what? It will be x is the element of, or let me rather say x, it will be from negative infinity to what? To positive infinity. Same applies for y. So now this will be our range. So now range will be what? Set of all y values for our function. Since well given our linear function is defined everywhere, that means y will also be from what? From negative infinity to positive infinity. That's the range for our linear function. So now drawing function. So I'm gonna do an example of linear function where we have to draw a linear
So yeah,